Hello, we're back.
Hello.
This is show 5, where we're going to be talking more about the energy principles that we talked about in show 4 and how we work with them. I think the thing about the show is really we want to talk about how the principles of the energy universe and the energy dimension must be properly reflected in what we do and how we do it in our daily lives in order for it to work. I guess a bit like the laws of physics, you can ignore them, but you're going to fall off the roof if you do. Does that make sense, Sarah?
It does make sense, yes.
Have you had personal experience of being out of sync with the universe?
Yes, I have. Yes, I've had a very serious experiences actually with being out of balance, ungrounded, which is very scary and difficult time really.
What did you do to address it?
Well, I did reach out at the time for help, but at that point nobody could actually help me. The people that tried to advise me or did advise me, it didn't actually make any difference.
Why do you think that is? What sort of stuff did you look for?
Well, I was looking for answers because my energy was so, as I can look back now, out of balance and I was ungrounded, and this has very serious effects. And I didn't know how to deal with it, but the people around me didn't know how to deal with it either. What they were telling me to do had made no difference. I'm guessing they don't know either. The lack of knowledge of knowing how to deal with it is the problem.
Does it piss you off then that you can't, people can't find this stuff around?
No, I'm being serious. It makes me so angry as well and concerned for people. I literally was even though I didn't do anything at that point, I got through however I did. It's a scary place, and it makes me concerned for others that go through that, and especially if they're on their own. I even had a couple of friends to talk to about it, even though they weren't experiencing it, but I could at least tell them how I was feeling and what was happening to me without thinking or worrying that they'd think I was completely and utterly bonkers. But some people must not have anybody, and it is fucking scary.
Yeah, I mean, we're not here to say, yeah, we know it and you don't, and make people look dumb. That's not what we're talking about, is it? We're talking, because I've been in the same boat as you, and one of the reasons I do what I do is because when I needed it, nobody had it. I vowed once I found out how it all worked, I would be there for people who needed it, because I tried everything. I was already pretty schooled in psychology. I'd done Reiki. I'd done all sorts of things, meditation. And the thing said to me, why the hell is this not working? And that's what was totally scary. Was that the same for you?
Yeah, it's very scary, because when what people say to you will help and it doesn't, you feel very alone, very scared, and you don't know what to do.
I saw a lot of these things. Nice. I think for sort of general relaxation, general stress relief, a lot of these things do work. Indeed, they did. They work very well. And I was working in television at the time, and that was a very stressy industry. And a lot of us were using techniques like meditation and Reiki and all sorts of things to de-stress. And generally, they work very well. A lot of them are very, very effective at reducing stress and tension and that sort of thing. What I found was that when I reached real crisis, they just didn't work. And the problem was that the more people said they did, the more I felt the failure, because I couldn't make them work. And one of the reasons I do what I do now is because there really wasn't anything around that actually would get me out of the hole I was in. And I vowed that when I found what it was, I would help other people. And I drove a long way. I saw many different people, because I worked in television. I had quite a decent amount of money at the time, so I'd get in my car, I'd get on a plane, I'd go wherever to try and find something that was going to fix me, because something inside said this has got to be fixable, but I couldn't find anyone to tell me how to fix it. studied psychology quite a long time, been on lots of courses, management courses, all that sort of thing. So I had a reasonable understanding of some of the psychological principles and studied it privately as well. But nothing would work. Was the same true for you with your experience? So you just kept looking and you couldn't find something to fix you?
Yeah, I couldn't find something or somebody at that point, because when I asked people for help or I read information that people said would help, it didn't. It really didn't. If any, and it makes you feel worse because it becomes, I don't know, you become more scared, you become more alone, and it's not a nice place to be.
I think that's a really, really important issue that this show is meant to focus on. People often say to me, "Oh, Steve, you're too critical of some of these techniques." And I say to people, no, I'm not critical of the techniques. I'm critical often of what they promise, because I deal with so many people and have dealt with so many people in my work whose expectations have been so high and then have disappointed. And the problem is that if a technique doesn't work, fair enough, but if people have really bought into it conceptually that's going to work for them and it doesn't, it can be incredibly harming to them. That's why I explained some of the psychological principles, for instance, of positive thinking. Positive thinking is one of the most damaging things to do, because you see people positive thinking, painting rainbows on everything and pumping sunshine, and sort of working desperately hard to get out of the emotional hole they're in, and really believing it's working until one emotion comes along, one trigger comes along, a phone call, an event, they see somebody, and the whole pack of cards crashes to the ground because it's not built on anything solid and it's not dealing with the basic emotional problems. It's trying to go away from those emotional problems and just paint a smiley face on everything. And people often criticize me and say, "You're so miserable," and you'll say, "You shouldn't be like that." What I'm saying is, using positive thinking is the equivalent of when your car doesn't work very well, you keep putting your foot harder and harder on the gas to get to the store to buy your groceries, and harder on the gas. And what you should be saying is, there's something wrong here. I shouldn't need to be doing this. Yeah?
Yeah, definitely.
So at best, these things can create expectation and then huge amounts of self-defeat when that expectation is not fulfilled. And at worst, if people are dealing with very deep problems, not just stress or day-to-day anxiety, can actually be very dangerous because of the psychological stuff and because of some of the principles of energy which they have very wrong, and we'll come to that in a moment. And in fact, we've got an interview with somebody who's typical of the sort of cases I've dealt with before, where they entered a practice that actually was very harmful to them. But for the moment, let's focus on this idea of expectation and defeat. The more that this stuff didn't work, did that sort of convince you that it was never going to work, or that you couldn't work it? How did that make you feel?
A bit of both, probably. Some part of it was, why is it not working for me? Because everybody else says it works. So you think, maybe I'm doing it wrong. Why can't I, see the effects that everybody else says they can? But also something else was inside telling me that this is wrong. That it was both. It was a mixture, and there were so many holes in lots of the principles that I came across that it couldn't work really, and it didn't work, but it couldn't either. When you look at it, it was just not possible.
Yeah, I mean, I do find that. I find a lot of fluffy logic in some of these principles. They've taken a leaf out of the psychology book, a leaf out of the physics book, a leaf out of the metaphysics book, and added a sprinkle of mysticism. And when you actually look for some contiguous logical proof or sort of examples, for instance, things like mind to me is totally fluffy. What sort of consciousness is mind? Is it mental consciousness? Is it energy consciousness? Is it intuition? And you get sort of fluffy answers. And I think the problem is a lot of these things are not working on very healthily defined principles. And the ones that are, I often find the principles are actually upside down. But what they've done, they've built on something that's got embedded in social belief. It's what I call the Popeye principle. the Popeye principle, and I quote it on my PN page on healmyenergy.com. The Popeye principle is that, and excuse me if I get this wrong, I'm trying to do it from memory, was that somebody tested spinach and found out it had 10 times more iron than any other vegetable. And so Popeye the cartoon was invented to teach kids to eat spinach so they get all this iron and all this nutrition 10 times more than everything else. And I believe it was something like 30 or 40 years before anybody bothered to test it again. And when they tested it, they found out it had exactly the same nutrition as everything else. So decades and an entire culture was built on a false premise. And you do see this. You do see this in metaphysics, particularly with the danger of mysticism creeping in. And we sort of discussed a little bit in the last show about how energy becomes male and female or whatever. And until you strip that away and go back to basic principles, it's very easy to develop techniques that are based on assumptions, and those assumptions are wrong. And I've seen this happen so many times. And then, as you say, when you get to question it, the answer's got holes in it. And so what I've heard so many times is people say, why does it work for everybody else and not for me? The question I'll ask you is the question I asked them. Did you actually see it working for the people around you, or how many did you see it genuinely working for, and how many did you see who wanted to believe it was working?
Well, the thing is, most people, it isn't working for them, but they're just saying it is, and they're still not got much change going on, but it's just their outlook is changing how they see these things. But the actual underneath, the real healing or changes that they wanted aren't actually happening.
And do you think that's because we need something to attach to, we need something to hang on to, we need something to believe is working?
Yeah, definitely. And it also, people don't like to admit that something's not working, or they're unhappy, or they're struggling, or they're not where they want to be, especially when all around you, when a new trend comes along and everybody jumps on it, you do feel like you don't want to admit that it's not really working for you.
Yeah, I see that a lot too, not least with The Secret, but let's not go there because that's probably a complete episode of its own. If it's not working, you're not doing it right. And how many times have I heard that? And I've seen so many people so desperate, convinced that they're not doing it right, convinced that everyone else is happy and they're not. And it's very sad. So what we're saying is, to come back to the core issue, what this show is about, this show sits between show 4, where we started to explain a bit more about how the energy dimension actually works and how it is quite separate from the physical dimension, but the ego likes to mix it all up. So it sits between that and the shows that we'll do on karma and destiny and soul connections and that sort of, and energy work and that sort of thing, because we need to really appreciate how we apply these principles, because if we don't apply these principles correctly, we end up with something that at least does not work, but at worst is actually dangerous. And I think what we're unveiling from this discussion we have today and what we've seen around is that the need to buy into something, what I call the buy-in, the need to buy into that something can heal me, is incredibly strong, isn't it?
It is, yes.
And I've seen that be very addictive. Did you see people addicted to the buy-in, addicted to the need to believe it's working, almost working so hard at trying to be happy that they were masking the fact that it wasn't working?
Yeah, definitely. It hides. It's trying to shift that focus, isn't it? From being unhappy to, if I keep doing this, it'll work at some point. And convincing themselves that little things may happen, and convincing themselves that it's enough, but it isn't.
I see that very much as to use the physical parallel or medical parallel as your drug of choice. You want to keep on taking it because the drug's going to fix you. But of course, the drug is unlikely to fix you. Because the drug in this case is probably just, it's a generalization, of course, but the drug is probably just taking you away from the symptoms. And what we need to do is actually deal with the underlying problem. Sarah, what made you admit that all this stuff you were trying wasn't working? What made you turn around? What made you say, hang on a minute, something in town isn't right?
Just had enough. I knew. I'd tried all things. I'd gone through a really difficult stage, and it was only after when things sort of leveled out a bit, really, and it still didn't improve, that I just thought, I don't know, something came from somewhere. I have to do more. I'm ready to do whatever.
Do you believe, because this is something I'm very firmly attached to, that we have an innate sense that when we do the right thing, it won't take forever, and it won't be the hardest thing, and it won't be so much work sweating every day to be happy?
Yeah, and also it will work. You'll see it changing. It shouldn't be a struggle, like you say, but also you need to see results. The principles on which I design my techniques are that God's a terrific designer and designed humans to be able to heal in every single way, and that we've already got what we need. We just don't understand it. And that's again where we come back to this working with the real principles, not the principles that have been distorted, maybe understood a long time ago, but distorted by man-made perceptions and overlays of icons and mysticism and belief and religion and all that sort of culture and that sort of thing, that humankind can innately heal. And if you actually want to see a perfect example of that, look at animals and kids who tend to flow and be generally not looking around for the next meditation technique because they haven't got themselves tangled up. So the core principle that guided me was to find out what is happening naturally, what should happen naturally, because it didn't make sense to me that nature would invent us to then have to go and get all these incredibly complex ways and work so hard just to be happy. It seems something that animals and kids had access to. Why should we not have access to it? Yeah. Yes, I agree.
Now we've talked generally around the issue that I think most people will be familiar with, where we've got ourselves a little bit more than stressed or anxious, and we've got ourselves some sort of crisis. It may be bereavement, maybe a soul connection, losing a job, breakup of a relationship. Could be anything. We have some sort of spiritual crisis that we just can't get through, and all the meditations and the counseling and everything is just not working. And that is, for me, is a very familiar situation, because those people come to me at that point. So I'm very familiar with that situation, and I've also been there myself. Now, this is the least damaging situation where the techniques that we've tried, because everybody who comes has tried at least half a dozen, they don't work. They relieve a bit of stress, but they're not long term. There is a situation where they can actually be damaging because they're based on principles that are fundamentally incorrect, and where the person has some very deep trauma, or what they're going through is unlocking some old, very deep trauma, then it can get dangerous, because depending on how that's unlocked and how it's naturally allowed to dissipate or not, can cause major crisis in people. Certainly things like Reiki, I'm a great respecter of Reiki, but I always say to people, I used to teach it, always say to people, do not use it beyond basic de-stressing, relaxation. It's great at what it does, and I apologize to Reiki people out there. It is not the tool for deep emotional crisis, because its principles have some fundamental limitations and flaws that can cause a great deal of problem if you do deal with somebody, if you are a Reiki person, you deal with somebody in deep emotional crisis. And I say this not from bitterness, from an experience of getting people come to me who've become psychotic, can't sleep, completely messed up, because somebody's been trying to help them, but has happened to unlock something that they then can't handle. And that's not the person, it's the limitations of Reiki and other quite simplistic healing methods. It's just exceeded their limitations. So we're not trying to shoot any particular discipline down. We're just trying to sort of be very realistic about this and say, use the right tools for the job. The other thing, that the one discipline I would say to people never to use, and by all means disagree with me, by all means, there's plenty of people who've done it and haven't had a problem with it. But there are dangers with it. Even if you've used it and it hasn't hurt you, there are dangers with it, and that's Kundalini. And Kundalini, the principles of Kundalini, or what's called upward energy, where the energy is made to flow up from the base of the spine and keep going upwards, is extraordinarily dangerous. There is an energy called fire chi that goes up from the base of the spine and then dissipates down through the body. But the upward energy practices do not let it dissipate. And what this causes is tremendous ungrounding. And when we become ungrounded, what happens is the physical consciousness, the brain, can cause all sorts of problems. The brain, remember, produces chemistry which controls the body. So we can get all sorts of physical symptoms. We can also get pretty weird energy symptoms, which you'll hear in the interview which follows in just a second. And we can also get really out of it. The number of people who've gone psychotic is quite considerable. So again, big warning on some of these things. We're not here to shoot this stuff down, but we're saying be careful, use the right tool for the job. And the point of the show is to say that one of the reasons some of these things aren't as effective as they could be, or in some cases can be dangerous, is because they do not reflect these core principles. They are based on somebody's interpretation or belief. So, for instance, with Reiki, I respect Reiki, but secret symbols, come on. Would the universe or God use secret symbols? These are superimpositions of mankind. Simple things like, if you're going to be grounded, you need your feet on the floor. How many people do Reiki with somebody without the feet on the floor? There's some big holes in this stuff. So whilst I respect it, just be really careful. All we're here to do is not to tell you what to do, be mum or dad or shoot anything down, but say, like my analogy earlier with the laws of physics, you can be a roofing contractor and ignore the laws of physics, but you're going to come off that roof if you do. It's unavoidable. So be careful, become aware. Generally, you cannot read about this stuff because what's out there mostly is based on what's popular, and what's popular is based on what's most believable, and what's most believable is based on trend. So you have to dig very deep and work very hard to find the real stuff. Be very careful about the stuff you come across that everybody's doing says is great, because we've got this whole issue of trend.
Why is it so difficult to find principles that actually really help people?
An excellent question. I believe it's the buy-in. I believe it's the drug of choice, and I believe the need to believe in something greatly outweighs whether it works or not. And I believe that principle is so powerful, such as diet pills. I mean, if you search for sort of weight loss, how many adverts do you see that say, just work out and sweat and you'll lose weight? They're not at the top of the searches, are they? What's at the top of the searches is Proton X, lose 40 pounds in 5 seconds while eating ice cream. Yeah, because we've got to buy into it. Yeah, sit on your fat ass and lose weight. Absolutely, because we've got to buy into it. The need to buy into it. The need to buy into it is so strong, and the need for it to plug into things that we already believe and constructs that sound sort of feasible to us. And this is why my big beef, the quantum neuro thing. If you add quantum and neuro to everything now, that sounds cool. Let's have some of that. And put some symbolism on it. I think that's the problem. This need to buy in. And I mean, nobody's immune from it. I've done it. You've done it. We're not being smug and look at us. We're smart. We're saying that these are issues that everybody faces, and there's also a lot of psychology of sort of, if it's got so many search results, then it must be great. And often the reality of that is the other way around. If it's got so many search results, it's been plugged and promoted so much. So you get like a mixture of lasers and massage and meditation. You get the whole gamut of stuff with nutrition, and it's all sort of big old massive, quite believable things because it's plugging into constructs that we've seen around. And so that's why it sells well. And to get past that in your searches and to find what really does work is very hard.
There seems to be few things to come across that actually do help, though. I find that really fascinating and surprising.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if this is how we're supposed to be naturally, which obviously it is, why is it so difficult to find that information?
I think
the only person I've come across that could help me was you.
Oh, bless
and I've
you.
searched and searched.
Well, no, I did. I showed you how to help you. That's what I did.
Well, yeah, but either way, but nobody else has been able to help me or.
But did your ego say? Did your ego say to you that you couldn't help you? That you needed something outside of yourself?
Possibly, but even so, I searched for all things.
Yeah.
Looked and it wasn't just a
well, when you find me,
you
know you've already tried 10 disciplines, because I'm not at the top of Google because I don't do the Oprah thing, and I don't do quantum neuro psycho nutritional purple wave. So I don't add the buzz phrases, and I don't do the punchy sort of, because if you need to buy into something, the chances are it isn't going to work. Because if you need to buy into something, it's going to be getting the gym outfit. It's going to be getting all rah-rah about it and giving up on day 3.
Yeah.
What I tend to do is say to people, look, this is going to be hard work. It's going to stretch you. You're going to be uncomfortable, but it is going to work. Because if you don't give them that reality, the chances of them doing it are 0.
Yeah. Because
just like I'm going to join the gym, within a week, the posh new gym clothes are in the cupboard, and you're sitting on the couch eating the ice cream again. So the buy-in is dangerous. It's very, very dangerous indeed. I say to people, don't have a buy-in. Just be prepared to do some work. Not unlike getting physically fit. If you really need to believe you can do it, you probably can't do it, because you'll build your expectation up. You'll crash on day 3, get tired, and won't go back, because there's that sort of expectation defeat cycle.
Yeah, you just got to do it as well, and
you've got to surrender to it. Absolutely, you've got to surrender to it. Yeah, but the thing about some of these things is we can control it. The sort of stuff I teach, you can't control. You've got to surrender to it and do it. Yeah. Just like the gym, a lot of these things we can buy in. We can access them when it suits us. We can pay online. We don't have to sort of have any inconvenience. We don't have to work up a sweat. We don't have to face that issue of what we did when we were 17 or the heartbreak when we were 22. We want to sort of skip around that. And there's the magic bullet fix of you can go from here to happiness without going through that, or at least dealing with it in some way, is very tempting. And I think these are the elements that make us want to buy that magic pill, yeah?
Yeah, definitely. But my other point also is that that is mainly what's on offer. That's the scary thing.
And everybody knows.
People will be drawn to that, and people will go through that and try it and get to where they need to get there. I get that.
And the common, what we're led to believe is it's helped thousands of people. What I ask people, I say, look, have your friends done it? Yes. Has it really helped them? And there's usually a pause. Well, a bit, or maybe 1 or 2. It just hasn't. You do not find the efficacy of it. You do not find a lot of healed, happy people. You find a lot of people who are working very hard. I'm not saying these things have never helped people. That's not what I'm saying. My analogy of the electrician. If you called an electrician around the house and he didn't fix your lights, you'd be pretty pissed about that. You call another electrician, he didn't. You'd be really pissed. You try 5 disciplines, it doesn't work. That you tend to, oh well. Where's the same logic applied? That hang on, why doesn't this work? And so what we tend to do is go, it doesn't work because of me, because I've read all the feedback. It works for everybody else. It doesn't work for me. And that then leads to the idea that some techniques work for some people and some techniques work for others. Totally, utterly, completely wrong. Your energy system works the same way as anybody else's energy system. So if it works for one person, it works for another. The same as sort of diet and exercise works for everybody. Now, if you start personalizing it and say, but my issue is this and my issue is that and my issue is that, any principle that works as an issue basis can't work. So, for instance, I get people call about my PN system and they go, oh, it's for soul connection. I say, no, it's not for soul connection. It's for healing people. It's for getting people balanced, whether they've had a soul connection, a bereavement, lost their job, emotional crisis, a spiritual crisis. What it does is bring people back to center. Any system that is just designed to deal with an issue can't work, because it's not dealing with your energy, bringing you back to balance. It's dealing with a situation.
Yeah.
And what the psychological based systems do is tend to deal with situations. So then the advertising is based on that. Have you lost in love? Try quantum neurohealing. Or does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
So it's a minefield. It's absolutely a minefield. People are selling hard, and people are selling hard, and people are buying hard. And it's almost, I say, this is a rite of passage that we have to go through that until we start realizing, hang on, as you said, your inner voice that's connected to the universe said, it shouldn't be this hard. Yeah?
Yeah. And also, there was pieces missing. There always was pieces missing.
So what's happened societally is somebody came up with something 50 years ago, somebody built on that, somebody built on that, somebody built on that, but these fundamental assumptions were flawed. The Popeye principle. So, for instance, we're going to cover this much more in our healing shows. We talk about orange, green, pink, etc., red energy. Energy doesn't have color because it does not exist on the physical plane. So, and the same as male and female energy, we talked about in the previous show, these sort of archetypes and labels were put on as symbolism, not to be taken literally. But now they've been taken literally, and people build on that. So they'll design a principle, and they'll say, I want to deal with the female energy, deal with the male energy. Another one, which would probably be really interesting for a lot of people, which we will deal with in the show about energy, there is no sexual energy. And I can hear people going, oh my God, there's Steve Gunn saying there's no sexual energy. Well, sex is an act, and that act can be had for a number of reasons. It can be had for submission, dominance, lust, passion, compassion, nurturing, sympathy, cash, control. Can be had for a dozen, 20, 30, 40 different things, all of which have different energies. So drawing this line between an act and an energy is wrong. This is exactly the same as saying this chakra does that and that chakra does that and that chakra does that. In a very loose way, yes, but it works as a system. So most of why we've got to where we've got and these things are ineffective is because they've accrued a lot of errors on the way through. And these errors have just compounded these principles which people have gone, oh, well, a million people believe that, so I'll build my system on those principles. They've built in the errors. And that's the problem. A lot of my work, most of my work, has been throwing that away and saying we cannot have anything that can't be proven to work. We cannot have belief. We can't afford it. We've got to say, can we do this repeatedly every time and get the same results? And does that tie into what we can see about the energy universe? If not, throw it away. So when people say, do you believe this? I say it's objective metaphysics. I can't afford belief. And you certainly don't want beliefs, my beliefs, and neither do I. If it can't be proven to work, it's not any use. And they say, well, isn't that science? Well, it sort of is, but then metaphysics should be like that. It should be objective. The same should be gardening, an approach to gardening or art. It doesn't mean that it's sort of losing the essence of it because it's objective. It means that it works. Yeah. But we have to lose the belief dimension, the belief dimension that makes us buy in to things that don't work. I sometimes say to people, if they've seen the movie The Matrix, and this matrix of illusion in which we live, it's a wonderful parallel to the real world where we live in this matrix of illusion. And I say to them, the matrix is basically these things you see around, and then you actually one day come to realize that most of this stuff isn't real because it's based on constructs and belief. History is a perfect example of that, actual history, and it's very different to how the history books are written. Future books are written based on the edited false history, and so you accrue errors all the way through until the modern day. And this is exactly what's been done in metaphysics, even worse because we've added in mysticism, religion, spiritualism, everything.
Bit of everything, yeah. Pick and mix it, add it all on.
Pick and mix, yeah.
So you've lost. So this is how the truth and the real principles have got lost.
Add to that the physical world, physical sciences. The physical sciences tend to dismiss anything that you can't see physically. Now, all of these scientists have pain and anxiety and love and sadness. They just write it off as something in the brain, but I suspect every single one of them has a sense it's something different going on. But because they can't measure it, because there's no gadget or meter they can measure it on, it's sort of conveniently dismissed, like it doesn't exist. So you get solid metaphysics mixed in with the worst and the best of mysticism, religion, belief, and it's just one big melting pot of, inverted commas, alternative, which conveniently shoves it out the way of physics. And they can easily dismiss what does work as well, until you can prove it physically. So there's that culture as well, because the thing about metaphysics is it doesn't sell pharmaceuticals.
Yes, very big.
So all of these elements have made the truth about how the energy universe and how the principles work elusive, completely elusive. And the beauty of it is, as you're aware, is it's actually really simple. It doesn't mean it's simple to learn, because it's sort of quite involved, but it is nowhere near as complex as man makes it. It just doesn't work in the way we think, because the way our brains work, they do not work in the way the universe works.
Yeah.
So
which is half the problem.
Well, absolutely, yeah. Well, let's roll the interview. This is a lady called Katya who had some particular problems doing Kundalini. As I say, we're not trying to necessarily shoot disciplines down. Kundalini, I would warn anybody against. And by all means, message me and say, "Oh, I've had great times with it." You're wrong. But it is pretty well known that some of its principles are very dangerous. Even people who used to practice it a lot write about it. You can check that on the web. Katya had some pretty funky experiences with it, and we'll roll that interview now. Well, thanks for coming along to agree to talk about your energy experiences, and particularly you did Kundalini, didn't you?
Yes. It was a couple of years ago, at a time that was difficult for me. So I was looking for something, and I came upon Kundalini, and I tried that.
And what was your experience?
It looked really innocuous at first, because it sounded like just yoga, which everybody likes and recommends usually.
And did you have friends who'd done it and recommended it?
Yes, I even had friends who have done it and recommend it. I don't know if they got as deep into it as I did, looking back in retrospect, but they're still doing it, some of them, and recommend it. Like I said, I don't think they're getting very deep into it. But for me, it was a very disturbing experience.
In what way? What?
I ended up in a very ungrounded state. There were a lot of symptoms that started coming up, some physical sensations, for example, like a feeling of crawling up and down my arms, up and down my body, a sense of electricity, like an electric current running through your body, some pressure in my head, like my forehead would feel hot, and there would be a sense of pressure, which made it impossible to really focus.
And did you talk to the teacher, the person who was teaching you, and did you ask about these symptoms?
I did, and they basically advised me to keep doing it.
Really?
Yes.
Did they say it was natural or to be expected?
Yes, they said it was natural and it was nothing scary. They did ask if I was pregnant, which I found strange because it seemed like also something can happen, Why would you ask that? Yes, but since I was not, they said, well, it's okay then, you just keep doing it.
And did they give you a reason why it was happening? Did they explain what was happening?
They said something was happening to my energy and that it was going to be okay.
And was it okay?
No, it got worse and worse. And the height of it, I could not get any work done because I had this fuzzy brain feeling all the time, like I couldn't think clearly and calmly. Then also, in the worst times, other things started happening. Like I could not drink water out of glasses because they would break in my hands. That was really scary to see because I had no idea where it's coming from and why.
What was that like? Did it make your hand squeeze and crush the glass, or did the glass shatter? What happened?
I would not squeeze. Even a light touch from my hands would make the glass crack.
Wow.
And in very strange cracks. It would either be one really straight crack all around the glass, like a ring looking one, or very like lightning looking cracks.
Yeah.
With angles and yes. Also the light bulbs in my house started burning up really fast.
How did you respond when the glasses started cracking and the light bulbs started blowing? Did that freak you out?
It did freak me out because on some level I realized that I was doing this, not intentionally. And I realized it was very out of control, very ungrounded. There was something going on with me that was about to drive me crazy. That was the feeling I had. And then there was more. I mean, pictures that were on the wall started falling off.
Yeah.
For no reason. I mean, the nail is still there, but the picture would just fall down. And finally, I had a big chandelier in the living room, which fell off of the ceiling right next to me.
Wow.
As I was sitting, yes, like literally a foot away from my head.
Now, people listening to this may well be very freaked out, and it indeed is pretty mind-blowing when it happens. It's actually not that unusual. And when your energy gets very, very ungrounded, this can and will happen. I've experienced it a lot, and I've seen things fly across rooms, and I've seen light bulbs blow. And however bizarre that seems, it does actually happen. It does. And you're somebody who's a scientist, aren't you? So you're very grounded in the physical world, and you're very knowledgeable about physics. So it's not like you're somebody who has a predisposition to this sort of thing. Yeah?
That's right. I tend to have explanations for things and to try and understand them. That's my natural ways. And that did not seem like something I could at the time understand.
Am I right in saying that you are a professor of computer sciences?
Yes, I'm a professor.
So you're not exactly somebody who's sort of smoking joints and hugging trees and wanting things to levitate then, yeah?
Not at all. Not at all.
So what was it like mentally then going through this as it gradually grew? Did you at first doubt it and then the evidence became overwhelming?
Yes, I was doubting it. The evidence did keep piling up. And so eventually I put two and two together and I knew what had happened. I knew something happened to me in the practice of Kundalini that led me to where I was. But I still could not quit the class.
So was that addictive or was it fear?
It was partially fear of what would happen if I just stopped. And then also it was addictive on a certain level because there was a feeling of high coming out of it. Every time I would go to the class, I would come home just feeling overwhelmed with joy and feeling really connected to everything around in the universe. There's this good feeling that was pleasant feeling, I would say, that was coming out of it. And very soon after that, I would start feeling the heat coming up in my forehead and all the other more unpleasant things. But I was still holding on to the high. It's almost like a drug.
Yeah, there is that element. It can be very, very addictive. And those highs, we've covered this in another show, and we will cover it in our show on healing. But these highs, this sort of delirium, this joy, is often seen by some of these practices as the desired state, this sort of blissful state. But as I point out to people, energetically speaking, it's as unbalanced as depression. It's, in fact, the other side of the pendulum from depression. The extreme high, and the extreme highs are often followed by extreme lows. So is using energy as a drug in a sense.
Yes, it was followed by extreme lows, typically on the following day, very soon. And so then that sort of reinforces the addiction because you feel like, oh, look at this, I need to do it again.
Yeah.
I need to go to class, I need to do the chants, the meditations. Yeah.
So how did you resolve that? How did you eventually untangle it? Did you just stop or did you ask for help?
Well, it's actually right around the time when I spoke to you. And I had not spoken to any other practitioners beyond this class. This was my experience, but I felt intuitively that this was not right, that something was going on, that I needed to change. And like I said, I had the feeling of I'm about to go crazy, literally. And so when I spoke to you, you very clearly told me you need to stop what you're doing. And I hesitated because partially I was scared, partially it's the addiction.
Yeah.
But you pointed out, well, is it helping you? Is it making you feel better? Is it solving your problems in any way? And I resisted for maybe about a week, and then I stopped.
And how was it when you stopped? Was it an immediate relief or did it take time?
It took time. It took about a month for things to settle down, and I was working with you pretty intensely during that month. So it all changed. The high came back a couple of times even afterwards, but I knew what it is and I knew how to handle it.
So you could see that was an unnatural state, but it's nothing to be scared of. It's when you become extremely ungrounded. You've got a lot of energy flow, but you become extremely ungrounded, or what it tends to do is come up and make the brain do all sorts of crazy things.
Yes, this is part of what my work with you taught me, was to recognize that state.
And how are you now?
I'm doing very well. My life has changed a lot in the last 2 years. So many different aspects, my job, my kids, my personal life. It's been transformational.
And is that, how do you feel that's linked to your energy? Those external changes. Do you feel that's linked to the changes that you've made to your energy?
Oh, very directly. I'm sure it's very directly linked. It's the energy changed everything. Just being able to keep it centered and balanced and grounded. It has made a tremendous difference.
And what would you say to somebody who was doing Kundalini but wasn't having problems? What would your advice be?
Well, wasn't having problems with Kundalini, you mean?
Yeah, if somebody was doing it but saying, hey, I don't know what your problem is because I didn't have a problem with it, what would your advice be to them? Would you suggest they keep doing it, or would you just tell them to beware that there could be pitfalls or not to get in too deep? What would your advice be? I'm not saying you're an expert, but from your looking back from what's happened to you, what would you say to a friend, say?
From my perspective, Kundalini is very powerful. And so with anything powerful, it can be dangerous. Yes, there are definitely pitfalls to watch out for. And if you get too deep into it, things change really fast from that place where everything is okay and it's going fine to the place where I was.
Now,
that happened
the people
overnight.
Who you know who are doing it, how are they getting on with it generally? Are they sort of, are their lives improving? Are they doing well? Are you seeing changes in them?
I don't think they're doing so well, in the sense that I still see the same coping mechanisms that they had before, like the people who drink still drink. I don't see any big changes like this, but I do see them very attached to it, like a kind of a dependence on it,
Yeah.
Sort of like everybody has their drug of choice. That's what they say. But it does remind me of a drug.
I hasten to point out the purpose of this show is not to shoot down Kundalini or Reiki or anything. It's just looking objectively at people's experiences and the sort of principles at work. And one of the big issue I have with Kundalini, and many people have, even people who used to practice it, you can go on the web and Google Kundalini and psychosis, and you'll see a lot of results, because the principles of upward energy upon which Kundalini is based are fundamentally flawed. Energy rising upwards is a natural progression of somebody spiritually awaking, but it's not the energy rising upwards that makes them spiritually awake, and the energy should not keep coming upwards. It sort of spurts up like a fountain, then comes down again and grounds. So the practice of constantly moving energy upwards is very, very unhealthy. And so the sort of thing you've experienced, I've seen a lot of people experience that. I've seen a lot of people that actually go psychotic because of it. So and that's what the show is about. This particular show is the fundamental understanding of the human energy and how it has to work. Unfortunately, Kundalini is one of the main disciplines that breaks those laws, because how it believes they work is fundamentally flawed. And what I'm saying is that look at the evidence, and what you've experienced and what other people experience does to, I believe, prove that. But as I say, that's for people to look at and just take the evidence that we're laying out in front of them.
Well, I'm happy to share my experience, and I would be very happy if it can help someone who is currently going through what I did. I'm not surprised to hear that people go psychotic sometimes with this, because it is very crazy making. So I'm convinced that there are real dangers in some of these practices, and I'm happy to share what I've been through. Hopefully it can help someone.
And without this being an advert for what I taught you, because that's not the intention, what are the differences between what I've taught you versus Kundalini in terms of results?
Oh, what you taught me was nothing short of life-changing in a very good way. It did lead to big changes, as I said, some of which I would definitely not have done. I feel like they're a direct consequence of the change in the energy. Overall, I just feel much better, much healthier. I am much healthier. I mean, even physically.
And would you agree that it demonstrates that the principles that actually work are very, very different to the other principles that you were taught?
Yes, for sure. I don't experience this kind of unbalanced highs or unbalanced lows anymore. I feel very centered and grounded most of the time, and there is still joy, but it is not the high of a drug feeling.
Yeah.
It's just this peaceful joy that's always there. And then emotions come, but I can experience them and flow through them and keep going. They don't keep me stuck.
Do friends doubt you? Because I've noticed a lot of people can't believe that we don't have our drug of choice, or that we can be happy without our drug of choice. Have you come across that?
Yes, I still come across that. It especially was happening a lot when the changes first happened. While I was working with you, people started saying, "Oh, you look so great. What have you been doing? Who is the guy?" I still keep getting asked who I'm in love with.
That is so common. I keep explaining that to people. They say, "Who are you sleeping with? What drug are you taking? What job have you got?" There's this general disbelief that we can be happy just through being, isn't there? Yes,
that's right. Even my very closest friends and family think that I must be in love.
There's an interesting principle that we'll come to talk about in the show, which I always question, and that is that people will do several disciplines and not actually expect to get better. Expect to have to do like half a dozen disciplines and really keep on at them, or maybe even more. And yet, if you had sort of half a dozen electricians trying to fix the electrical work in your house and it didn't fix it, you'd go crazy. Say, hang on, this is not right. We should be able to fix this. Yet we don't seem to believe that we can be happy without attaching ourselves to lots and lots of disciplines and making it extremely hard work. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes. I think it's just I mean, this is evidence, as you said. It's nothing to believe in, but we see this just shows us that it's not working if you need so many of them.
Yep.
None of them are working. That's what it is. If you had the one that works, then it would have just worked by now.
Yeah, and I think the addiction thing is you see a lot of people working very hard to try to be happy, and we need to believe that we're on the way, don't we? We sort of cling to that belief that we're moving forward, which helps make it addictive. Would you agree?
Yes, I would. It's many different disciplines that people try and ways to get themselves happy, especially guided meditation. I mean, coming from the technical world, I've seen various very complicated computer programs and mobile apps that do guided meditation where you check off boxes of what you've done and you keep going and you do like a little step of it every day, and then you buy a new package. And so it feels very much like you're accomplishing something, like you're taking care of it, but it's a kind of attachment that people get dependent on.
Yeah.
That's the other thing with what you taught me that I feel is different, is that once we finished working together, I still have it with me. It's still here.
Yeah, you've got it for life. It's a way of living, isn't it?
Yes, it's a way of living.
And the reason it works is not because I'm big and smart and clever, which I can assure you I'm not. It's because it is in line with the natural principles. And what my work is about is really uncovering and researching the natural principles, and has, if anything, has shown that we really generally don't understand many of those principles, and so many of the disciplines that we're taught are based on an incorrect understanding of them. And that's what this show is about, and trying to illustrate that once you work things the natural way, there is no better than the natural way, because the universe created that way. So so you're using techniques I designed and taught you. What makes those techniques effective is that they are aligning you back up in the natural way that you should be aligned. So that's what makes it powerful.
Makes sense.
Because God is a much better designer than me or you or anybody else. So
yes.
In understanding those principles properly, then we can start to move forward. But in order to do that, we have to take away a lot of the beliefs and a lot of the attachments that we've been taught and conditioned to.
Right. That was the hard part.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, to let go of the attachment, just surrender.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for choosing to share your journey.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed the show.
And congratulations on everything you've achieved, because it's hard work, isn't it? Although I taught you what to do, you're the one that did it. So you're the one that is responsible for your own happiness. And that is incredibly impressive and incredibly empowering for other people to see what you've achieved.
Oh, thank you. I'm very grateful that I found you at the time when I did. Yes.
That Kassia's story completely resonates with me. I went through a lot of those symptoms that she did, and far more. And also, what I want to say is that it's really surprising to me, and it makes me very concerned how difficult it is to find help out there, because it is a very serious thing. And the only way I found help was by doing PN that Steve taught me.
It sounds like an advert for my system, Sarah. You're trying to plug me?
Of course. You're the only person that I came across that actually could help, and I'm being serious, because...
You mean the techniques I taught you?
The techniques that Steve taught me, rather than Steve, sorry. But those techniques are the only things that have actually helped me. More importantly, they're the only things that allowed me to help myself, rather than relying on somebody else to do that for me. Going to somebody to heal me, it allowed me and allows me to heal myself and to work with my energy.
And that's why we're doing what we're doing, isn't it? To spread the word that there are things there, get people more aligned with it, and get more techniques out there based on the real principles, yeah?
Yeah, it's really important to me, because I know how it feels, as you do. And, I don't want people to suffer and not be able to find something that works for them. I want them to be able to find something and use that and help them change their life, help them, deal with that.
This is where certain listeners roll their eyes and go, there's Steve Gunn being pretentious that he's the only person who can heal everybody in the world again. That's not what we're saying, is it? We're saying that my work as a researcher started again and threw away the psychology, threw away the seven chakra principle, threw away that and started again. And that's what went back beyond all those errors that accrued back to the core principles, not from writings, but from working with real people, working with real energies, working with the universe, not working with what 10 different people interpreted because of that danger of accruing problems. And I was very blessed at the time because I'd had a great job in TV, earned lots of money, and then when I came out of it, because I was an executive, they had to pay me for like a year or something after, so I was getting paid anyway. So I spent years not earning a cent, just doing this research, and so that was a blessing in a sense. I foolishly thought that people would leap at it afterwards and go, "Oh yeah, great," because they don't. So it's sort of degree of cynicism. Oh yeah, Steve Gunn says, but I had the luxury of being able to go back and throw everything away and start again. And when you do that, you really uncover so much stuff where these principles had come in and been misconstrued, misinterpreted from, say, the Sanskrit scripts and all that sort of thing. So I didn't go back to original material. I threw it all away and I went back to humans and what we knew about the energy principles and more importantly, what we could prove on a regular basis. That's what objective metaphysics is about. If you read my website, stevegunn.net, I talk about objective metaphysics. What that means is what can be demonstrated and proven time and time and time again, not what I or you or Uncle Frank or Sarah believe about things, because that can be polluted. So I share Sarah's frustration about stuff not being out there, and that's why I got into it, and that's what I do, because when I needed it, it wasn't there, and the stuff that was there just didn't work. We're not saying everything's junk. We're not saying I'm the only one that's got the answer. We're saying what's unique about this approach is that it's based on some pretty solid research. Most things aren't. They're based on other people's work and interpretations, and unfortunately, over time, errors and assumptions creep in. And there are principles at work. For instance, if you want to de-stress your life, there's 100 different techniques you can use. That's not a problem. If you want to start changing your energy, there's probably 50 techniques you can use. But if you want to do the real deep stuff, undo the deep wounds and really turn yourself around, that's when these things don't work, because they don't work at a deep enough core level on the basic principles to actually access that. And as you've heard from Kathy's interview, and that's typical of quite a few people, used Reiki, Kundalini, and other techniques, which they've tried to use it for something that it was not able to cope with, can actually even be dangerous. So what we're doing here is not being precious. We're saying, think again, look at it again. I offer my techniques on healmyenergy.com. I'm hoping I'm not the only one in town. I'm hoping other people will want to develop techniques. I'm happy in time to teach other people how to use that system. But what we're here to do is, Sarah and I particularly do not want to find other people in the situation we were in and them not have help. But that's unfortunately what we see all the time, isn't it, Sarah?
Yes, and like you say, it is something that if anybody that can hear this and help them, then it's worthwhile, because it's a horrible place to be. And on the other side is where you find that freedom, that help. That's what it's all about.
And that's why this show is about, although we've talked a lot about personal healing, it's really about technique. The techniques that work are the techniques that unlock your innate ability to heal and grow and change. And those can only be unlocked when those techniques are based on the core principles of how the energy universe works. And what we're saying is, and we've said it in many roundabout ways, what we're coming back to is a core message that there's a real need to appreciate and understand how the energy dimension works in order to develop techniques that can work. Sadly, that will mean throwing away a lot of the psychological principles and a lot of the other principles, and that's where we have problems, because people say to me, oh, but can I still do psychology and can I still do this? And I say, nope, you can't, because they are as much the problem as they are the solution. And that's when I imagine how much that's welcomed. We're not saying that stuff is wrong, we're just saying that it's the wrong context, and unfortunately you can't get away with it. You can't mix and match. You've got to have something that has its own context. The one thing that we are aware of is how the energy universe works is beautiful. It has a simplicity and a complexity that are quite magical, but they're very, very different to how we are sort of trained to think about them. Would you agree, Sarah?
Yes, I do agree. Yes.
Once you find out how it works, you say, oh, wow, it seems so clear, yeah?
So clear, and it almost seems so simple, but also so utterly complex at the same time. I don't know, it's just amazing.
But to get there, you can't get there from where you are. You almost have to throw everything away and start again.
Because, you certainly do, yes.
Yeah, and that's the challenging bit, isn't it? Because the first thing I say to anybody that comes with me is you've got to forget ego, psyche, personality, intellect, understanding, mind, thought, thinking. All these constructs have got to go. And they go, what? You're going to throw all that away? Yeah, you've got to throw it away, because it might be really cool at doing some things and it may be really funky at doing others, but inbuilt with it are some fundamental flaws that are going to be the problem. One thing we haven't yet mentioned is what are the basics of some of these principles and how do they differ? Well, the universal principles are based on simplicity. The universe doesn't make things complicated. She makes them quite simple. And it's based on a non-attachment. So an energy or an emotion doesn't have an intent or a purpose. It just is. Now, that's very hard for us to understand because the ego wants to superimpose onto everything, an intent, a purpose, a cause, effect, and an outcome. Energies don't have that. They just exist. So it's the simplicity of existence. Now, the second thing is multiplicity. Again, non-attachment. We don't love one person, we love everybody, or we hate everybody, or whatever. It's not specific. So in other words, the universe wants you to have lots of love and lots of hate and lots of fear and lots of happiness and lots of joy and lots of pain, and be what I call energetically promiscuous. The ego doesn't want that. The ego wants to assign specific people we want to love, specific people we want to like. So again, that's completely at odds at how sort of ego-based psychology works. The third principle is flow, not understanding. No need to understand, just the need to flow. The need to understand comes from ego trying to predict into the future, which means we can't be in the moment. And the fourth principle is acceptance, which is, again, is part of flow, not trying to predict or judge. So these are some very cool principles which we'll go into, and there are others. We'll break them down in future shows. We're just trying to outline it here. Ego-based or pop spirituality is based on complexity, multi-levels, multi-dimensions, gods, goddesses, male and female, hierarchical, higher selves, lower selves, mind, body, spirit. It's very complex, and it is sort of, the ego likes that because it can buy into all this complexity. Secondly, singularity. This person is the focus of my love, and this person is the focus of my anger, and this person I'm supposed to be with. There's no multiplicity. There's no what I call energetic promiscuity. I don't mean physical promiscuity. I mean loving lots of people and being angry with lots of people and generally allowing yourself to flow. And the third thing is, rather than acceptance and flow, is control. The ego wants control. It wants to know and it wants to control. And so a lot of the principles of pop spirituality are based on feeding this ego that you can control your emotions, you can control your future, you can manifest this, you can suppress that, you can make this happen. And these are just some of the fundamentals, and we will break them down in different shows. For instance, shows about karma and soul connections and healing. We will break them down more, but this is just to underline and underpin why everything we do must be based on these principles, or else it just can't work. That's us. We're finished. Say goodbye, Sarah.
Bye.
Hope it made sense. Join us next time on The Flow.